I'll hop in and I want to talk about ideology, but first kind of set the stage to kind of state that 85% of the nation's teachers are white, right? So our education system not only is designed to affirm Eurocentric and white worldviews, but it's an industry that's primarily populated with white people. And naturally, our teachers are going to come into our classrooms with viewpoints and ideologies and biases that are so steeped in whiteness, right? So many well-intentioned educators subscribe to the deficit ideology when trying to help Black and Brown and low-income students achieve success. And the deficit ideology approaches students based upon their weaknesses rather than their strengths. And it's an ideology that explains educational outcome inequalities like the gap in, the disparity in standardized test scores or the college graduation gap, which by the way is just growing wider between Black and white and Asian students. And just to give you an idea, the National Center for Education Statistics reports that Asian students graduate college at the highest rate at 36%, white students at 32%, and Black students only at 23%. And Latinx, I think, is at 25%, right? So deficit ideology really justifies these inequalities by pointing to the deficiencies within these students, within their communities. And the idea here is that we have to fix marginalized and disenfranchised students rather than the conditions that work to marginalize them. And really, the reality is that there's nothing wrong with the intellectual capabilities of Black students. We don't need to fix them, but we do need to fix the racist systems that help the disparities in education to persist. And then, I think it's important to talk about, well, where did this ideology come from? There was a 1966 report called the Coleman Report, and it was the most influential educational study that introduced America to the idea of a Black and white achievement gap. So Coleman was the lead researcher, and he argued that inequalities in school resources didn't contribute to the inequalities of student achievement, but it was a student's families, it was their peers, it was their environments that helped to determine their achievement. So essentially, this report blamed Black students and their families and their communities for the lack of academic achievement. And this report resulted in an entire generation of educators trying to fix the students and their families rather than fixing the system that had produced unequal learning opportunities for Black students. And I'll end with, if you are in education or if you've read Angela Duckworth's Grit, she has a book out called Grit, and there's something else to the title. This grit ideology is an example of deficit thinking that a lot of well-intentioned educators who really want to help Black students achieve subscribe to. And it acknowledges the structural barriers that marginalized students face. But instead of working to create policies and practices to eradicate those barriers, they focus on strategies that will increase the grit of the students, right? The thing is, students who are experiencing things like housing insecurities, food insecurities, and racism, and they're still showing up to school despite these challenges, are already the most grittiest students in the school, right? So these ideologies really don't help to decrease inequalities in education. They just force students to deal with things that they shouldn't have to deal with. So that's a little bit about ideology that I wanted to share.
Cindy, can't hear you.
Thank you. Sindhu, thank you for that. Previously, you had mentioned, Sindhu, that using the word achievement gap is actually used as, it's really from a deficit mindset. So the more proper term to use would be opportunity gap, right?
Yeah, I thought I was talking too much, so I wanted to stop where I left off. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. Even our language is implicit with deficit thinking in education. So traditionally we say achievement gap, and that suggests that there's a gap in the achievement, right? That Black students are inadequate or incapable of academic achievement at the same rate as their white or Asian peers. But that shows the deficit thinking. I think we should consider the word opportunity gap, which a lot of educators are now using. And this draws attention to the obstacles that students face throughout their education careers, and it places responsibility on the inequitable system that's not providing the opportunities for all students to thrive and succeed. And so it's so important to change our mindset. We're trained to think about, the Black students and low-income students as we need to fix them, but we really need to fix the systems that work to marginalize and oppress them.
100%.